Hello, I'm Rachel from Douentza Garden in Ireland, and you're very welcome to this video. Now, this isn't a garden tour video, it's a bit more detailed than that. So in this video I'm going to show you the scummy end of my garden. Scummy in Ireland means kind of the dirty, no-see area that we don't relish ourselves and that we don't like when people scrutinise too closely. Every garden has one, and it's usually the corner that's furthest away from the action, furthest away from the house, which it is here. So this corner over here is a border that I really don't love, and the result of that is that, well, you're going to see. So let's go on over here and have a look at what I'm doing with the scummy end of my garden at the moment. So this border behind me is the border, let's just say, that I love the least, and it has some problems which we'll go through in a few minutes. I guess not least of all, it's furthest away from the house, so it's difficult to water. So if I were to put something nice in there in terms of a plant, I would have to water it in well, and that's just problematic because it's so far away. So on the right is the tail end of the long border, which I do love and I do maintain, but I guess, if truth be told, the further you go over towards this corner, the less loved it is. And I do have a very good viburnum here, Douentza, which is particularly low maintenance and evergreen and looks handsome all the year around. Also, Kinnicloa rubra, the New Zealand tussock grass, is behind it, and that's also a very easy plant to maintain. But I guess the border that we're going to talk about today is this one here, and the best thing about it is this big Acer tree. Well, every scummy border should have a scummy bench, and this is my scummy bench. It's just a plastic bench that I guess looks the worse for wear, so I kind of took it out of the way. But this tree is interesting because I bought it just as a small twig, I don't know, maybe more than 10 years ago, and it has done so well. Now, we tend to think of Acers as, you know, the Japanese maples, which are quite slow growing, but this one has grown very well in a relatively short period of time, and it is a handsome tree. This is a multi-stemmed tree, and it has the most beautiful kind of acid green leaves that look so dainty in spring and keep on giving all through the year. Now, I don't have a name for this tree because it was bought in a packet at a show many moons ago, and yeah, before I started keeping records of my plants, but it is a good one. I do need to remove branches from it occasionally, and I guess this branch must go, and perhaps that one there, because I don't want it to cast too much shade over the grass and kind of eat away at the grass area. I want it to just really stay in that border there. This border is difficult enough without having to extend it. In the very corner between the scummy border, we're going to call it the scummy border now, I think, and the long border, we have an Amelanchier tree, and this is Amelanchier canadensis, which is beautiful when it's in flower, but it does seem to flower for a very short period of time. And underneath it we have dead nettle, which actually looks quite great at the moment. Now, this is a bulletproof plant that is doing so well under here, and I'm actually thinking of extending it to somewhere else because it is a plant for a problem area. Now, this year it had a radical tear back, which is why it's looking so neat at the moment, but it is a plant that will go everywhere if you let it. But while this looks like an ugly corner to me, there's one member of my family, my grandson, who just loves it. It leads to his secret path. And just a little word about this section of the long border, which, as we just mentioned, is the bit I love the least. Now, we have some nice planting in here, including my cardiocrinums, but at the back we have a very large euphorbia, we have a magnolia tree, we have a tetrapanix, we have an abutilon, we have the Circe's forest pansy, which is this tree up front that hasn't come into leaf yet. And at the very back we have dead space, because you see that area in spring now, but once summer gets going and all the perennials grow up, then you're not going to see the very back of the border. And that presents certain problems, because, you know, what can you plant in an area that you only see in spring? And I found the solution last year when I had some daffodils in pots for pot displays in front of the house. And there comes a point when you think, well, actually, I've had these for long enough in the pot, I really better get them in the ground, otherwise I'm going to lose them. And I put several clumps of those daffodils in the space between the berberis over there and the Vigilia tree there, which also hasn't come into leaf yet. And it was lovely this spring, because you could see bright sunny yellow in a bare spot down there at the very back of the garden. So I extended the idea again this year, and over the other side, which is like kind of up against the euphorbia, I put the pots of daffodils, like the cheerfulness, yellow cheerfulness that I grew in pots for the front door display. This year I put there at the back. It's quite sheltered. You see it very well in spring, and then it disappears in a kerfuffle of tall perennials during the summer. So if we swing just a little bit over this way back to the border that we're supposed to be talking about today, you'll see that there's a big mass of what looks like, well, dead branches. And this is my Rhomnea tree. So I think this common name for this tree is Californian poppy or poppy tree or something like that. Anyway, Rhomnea culturi is the proper name, and it's a divil to prune. I always find that I prune it too early in the season and end up giving it dieback, so it dies back a bit further. There's certainly lots of wood to come off. So you may wonder why I haven't cleaned up this area, why I haven't pruned back the Rhomnea, and why there's a lump of dead nettle right there in the middle. And the truth is that I discovered something very interesting when I went to weeding. This, my dear gardening friends, is a hedgehog nest. Certainly, I don't know if nest is the correct word, but it's where he hibernates, and I certainly don't want to disturb that. Now, the hedgehog is still asleep. He sleeps through the winter, and he wakes up when it's his time to wake up, so he doesn't need to be disturbed by an overzealous gardener. So we're going to leave the hedgehog sleep for a bit longer, and I'll tidy that up as and when needs be. And the next thing to show you here is a large Fatsia japonica, a tree, I suppose, that's used very often in subtropical gardening in this part of the world because of the leaves. The leaves are considered quite elegant. It is a pet hate of mine because this bush just gets so dense with all the leaves that you can't really see them, and a lot of them get dog-eared looking. I gave it a bit of a tidy up beforehand, removing any leaves that had blemishes on or any that were just too congested, but I didn't want to go overboard because we may get a frost at this a bit later on in the day, and the frost would then knock it back further. So I'll wait till the danger of frost has passed and then do a job on it. And then just over here we have a hydrangea. So this is hydrangea macrophylla, and this one is the lace cap variety. And as we can see, it has the beginnings of its flower clusters already. And in the understory here we have two clumps, a clump of the most sturdy geranium that tolerates a good bit of shade, and a clump of leucojum or snowflake. So I suppose this border holds things that are really robust because if they weren't given the minimal amount of attention they get, they'd be long gone. And you may wonder what this dead looking thing is behind me. Now this is a cotinus. If you watched my last videos, especially the one where I pruned 7 shrubs in spring and talked about pruning a cotinus, you will recall that I tend to pollard my cotinuses now so that they grow big leaves and don't flower, except for this one. And this one I allow do its thing and it flowers, and as you can see it's kind of reaching out towards the light, so it's planted back a bit and then it's come back and it kind of cascades down here and it fills in a whole lot of space that would otherwise be a problem for me. So in summer this looks really quite wonderful when it's in flower. It's one of these shrubs that's a bit late to leaf up, so it's just getting going now, but it certainly does a job of work in here. I just need to be careful that it doesn't send its branches out over the box bowl that I have here, because you will recall that I have had box blight here in the garden. I've treated it, and I certainly don't want anything lying on top of my box bowls, because that will give rise to blight situations. This year I have sprayed all of my box already with Topuxis, which is a foliar fertilizer that you can use, and I found it as a great treatment to cure box blight and to keep it away. And all of the bushes have had a spray, including this one here. So just fingers crossed as we go forward. So what else do we have here? Oh yeah, the Cordyline tree. Now, anybody who lives in kind of coastal Ireland will be very familiar with the Cordyline tree, because we grow it here as it looks like a palm. So people generally think it's a palm tree, although it's not. And it is a great tree for about 10 years. And then at about 10 years, which I suppose is the age that this one here is, it gets too high to reach. Now this is a tree that constantly sheds leaves, and well, I guess that's not its worst habit, because if it sheds the leaves you can take them away. They can't go on the compost, but you can dispose of them. It's the leaves that it hangs on to that's the problem. Now if we look at this tree here, you can see the remnants of a flower spike. This was a flower spike. And the leaves that have not yet fallen, and usually you can pull these off, so it's a bit of a tedious job. You probably have to do it one by one, as they're a bit tough to remove. And the issue, I guess, what I'm saying with this tree is that it is just going beyond my reach. So I can get a number of them, but there are a number of leaves that I can't reach and I can't pull down. Now, you may recall that I visited a garden in Dublin called Medina Garden last summer, and he had a lot of Cordyline trees, and the ones that he had none of this brown skirt underneath. So I asked him, how do you do it? Such tall Cordyline trees, how do you ever manage getting them spruced up and nice looking? And you know what Carl said? He said he uses a ladder and he gets up there and pulls down the lower leaves. Well, I don't think I'm quite that finicky, especially not for my scruffy end of the garden, but I will give them a pull and clean up these leaves and put them not on the compost, because they take too long to biodegrade and break down. They're very, very tough. Anyway, I think I do not recommend Cordyline tree, just because you end up having these kind of maintenance issues. And even when the tree is short enough that you can reach and pull those leaves, it's still quite a job of work to do. So there we are, that is my scruffy border. Things to do now are to clear up the Cordyline leaves. That will take quite a bit of time. I need to then, well, wait until the hedgehog comes out of its nest and then clear up the Romnea over there, prune it a bit, wait until first frost has passed, remove a good number of the leaves on the Fatsia, and maybe take off a branch or two of the Acer. It's not the right time to do that, but it is generally hard to see in winter what branches need removing. When the tree leaves up in spring, that's when you realise that you've got a big leafy overhang on the grass or wherever. And yeah, you can't see that so clearly in winter. So I tend to prune in spring or summer, which is not the correct time. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video on my messy end of the garden and my solutions. I was thinking perhaps at the very front I need really a good geranium, one that tolerates shade. I have two in there which I'm not so very happy with. Something that tolerates shade and flowers well. Or maybe even just some clumps of daffodils at the very front, which are low maintenance plants that will provide a splash of yellow in spring and just give the whole area a little bit of interest. If you enjoyed this video, perhaps you'll consider subscribing to the channel, and perhaps you'll also tell me a little bit about your messy end of the garden. We all have one, we all hate it, and we all tend to neglect it even more because we just don't like going down there and doing the tidy up jobs that need to be done to make it passable. Thank you as always for watching this video, and I will see you on the next video. Bye!